If you're tired of the standard business and marketing fundamentals, frameworks, and funnels, you need a little mischief. Get ready to turn up the volume on the CEO Mischief Maker podcast, where you access conversations with seasoned business owners who have smashed through mindset barriers, innovated the standard boring business and marketing playbooks, and executed future-paced strategies with bleeding-edge tools and tactics to micro-fail their way into massive success and growth. We are Mindset Impact Strategic Catalysts helping innovative entrepreneurs focus. We are CEO Mischief Makers. Ready to make a little mischief? Hey, CEO Mischief Makers, MKJ here. Welcome back to the conversation. And you know where we start. If this is a Monday and you're listening to this for the first time, then you know we're starting with mindset. So my guest, beautiful guest, cannot wait to chat with her about all three of the topics you're going to hear over this week. We have Brittany Filori. Brittany, hey,
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yay. All right, so mindset. We all start there, but before we dive into those details, I get so excited I just jump in because I know you and I expect everyone else knows you. So let's just start there. Tell people who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So I am the CEO of 51 Blocks, former COO. So mindset's going to be huge for us to talk about because that's a whole space for an operations person. I have a background in marketing. I have an MBA. And really, I'm just kind of passionate about leadership. That's a huge part of my career. As I've moved up the ranks, I've always led people. So that's a little bit about me. Other than that, I reside in the Pacific Northwest. I have 2 teenagers, which definitely keep me on my toes. And I manage a team of 35 with nearly 600 clients. So I stay pretty busy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It sounds like the business is probably in the same teenage stage as the kids, if you think about it that way, right?
It takes the same amount of patience for sure.
Right? Yeah. I had a whole other podcast called Parent Entrepreneur Power. And the whole process was to show people how, if you're a parent, if you've helped a kid go through potty training, business is nothing.
Yeah.
You got business because they have the same stages, right? We have the newborn stage. We have the toddler stage where we go 2 steps forward and fall back on our bum, right? We have the teenage stage where we're breaking through. And I mean, it's all the same stages. So it was very clear when you were explaining that your business and your kids are kind of in the same stage right now.
I mean, truly. Yeah. And it's the same
gosh.
emotional roller coaster, right? I'm so proud in the same ways, just like I'm like, oh, we need a learning moment here. The same ways for sure.
Yeah. No more timeouts, unfortunately. Anyway, or their timeouts are quite different. They're not sitting. Yeah. Anyway, all right, mindset. So you just kind of just said some really profound things when you just explained or introduced yourself. And when you talk about going from COO to CEO, those are very different roles. And as a company grows and progresses and gets larger, where there's no longer just say a founder and an integrator, right? Or someone who's the innovator in the space and the other person who is the integrator or the operations person that makes it happen. Those are 2 usually different roles. And usually the CEO takes on that role of the innovator, the visionary, all those things. And the COO is usually the operator and the systems person. So how did you go? First off, tell me if I'm right in your organization while you were COO and how mindset wise you shifted to that CEO role.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So we follow EOS, visionary and integrator, standard kind of roles. I've always been a very detail oriented person. And I've always been the above and beyond kind of mentality. And so I think that's actually how I found myself in an operations role. When I first came into our agency, I was hired in to do SEO account management. Within 2 weeks, I was promoted to an operations manager. Within a year, I was already sitting at a COO level. So it was really interesting because my path was very fast. And it had a lot to do with just my attention to detail, wanting to make sure everything ran smoothly. It really came from that like root that's inside of me. And as an integrator, our job is to take someone's vision, whether it be realistic or not, and see how we can make it possible. And it is such an intricate role. And it takes a lot of, like we kind of talk about being a parent, right? It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of understanding and communication skills, things like that. And when I was on a path to be promoted into CEO, it was a conversation with our current owner and previous CEO that he wanted an exit plan. And his primary concern was who was going to care for my agency in the same way that I do. I actually went through about 6 months of training with a mentor in order to shift my mindset. I was so focused on the details that I wasn't allowing myself to be a visionary. So that was kind of step one in my journey, was like getting a mentor and really starting to look at things from a 10,000-foot view where I wasn't used to living. I lived and breathed in the weeds.
Isn't
So
that it? That's it. That's exactly. I
yeah,
love how you put that, because it doesn't mean that one cannot do the other role,
right.
right? It does not mean that at all. And there are some of us who are not so far into either side that we can kind of straddle the fence on both
Mhm.
sides. However, we still have a nature that we prefer. Not that we're better at or worse at, but where we
Right.
prefer, where we really love living.
Right.
And so first off, you kind of were thrust into this operations role pretty quickly.
Right.
So that doesn't mean that's where you love and that's where your core competency and all those kinds of things are, your zone of genius, all the buzzwords we've known over the last decade or more. So how tell me more about that mindset shift and how this mentor helped you think at that 30,000-foot level instead of down at ground level.
Right, right. Well, I had to tap into first my old passion, or I wouldn't say old, but it was a passion that I felt like was hibernating, which was like true leadership, where I could come in with ideas and then you leave it up to the team, right? Because I became the team who implemented the ideas. So for a long time, I wasn't sitting in that role anymore. And so I kind of had to learn how to be a leader again, where I took it from a level of, hey, team, we're going to go execute A, B, and C, and more like, here's what it looks like a year from now at this agency. And so that was really the first big mindset shift, was back into leadership, back into understanding how you can get others on board on the mission, and I think that's really where I learned how to dial in my focus of stepping into a CEO role. Was like, wow, wait a minute. Like, I think I went through probably a month or two of imposter syndrome. I was like, there's no way, right? I'm a COO. This is all I know. This is what I do. And I'm good at it. And so it almost made me question, is it possible for me to be good at being a CEO? And as soon as I realized that the mindset shift was like, oh, back into leadership, Brittany, back into understanding how you communicate effectively to your team and you get them excited and you get them on board, I was like, I can do that. That's something that I used to love when I was a mentor back in the SEO space. And so I really brushed up on a lot of my communication skills, on learning how to phrase things in a way that got people excited. And in turn, it's actually helped me create one of the best teams I've ever worked with, because the energy I put out is exciting people to get on board with where we're headed. And I always speak to like our 5-year goal. I don't even speak to the quarterly goals as much. I'm always like, hey guys, remember, we're headed here. And so that was probably the biggest part of the mentorship that I went through, was understanding how I could shift my leadership style, because again, it wasn't going to be task oriented. It was going to be very big picture, high level. And then 2, it was understanding how I could serve the company in a different way. So my current service as an integrator was to make sure that systems and processes ran. Everybody was on board with the SOPs. Everything was in place, right? The finer details. And suddenly it was like, how do I serve a company in terms of growth, in terms of setting a goal and achieving the goal and how we're going to get there, those things. So that was really big for me. That was a huge, I think, a learning curve for me to stop kind of taking that employment mindset of like, how does this company serve me? What am I getting out of this right now as a leader, as a role that I'm taking on? And it shifts to, how do I serve this company? How do we get this company to the next level? It's a very interesting dynamic. And certainly, just as the same you kind of touched on, not everyone can wear all the hats. And certainly there are people who are better in operations than being a CEO. I see that a lot with owners. Not every owner is cut out to be a CEO. So it's all very interesting, as
Yeah,
you
it
pull it
is.
apart.
And we find our place. We definitely
Mhm.
do. And there are many people who choose not to be the CEO. They might be the driving force in the company when it first starts, when they're the founder.
Right.
But I have to, so a couple of things, oh my gosh, that we have to touch on right there. I love what you said when you talked about you had to switch from what can the company do for me to what can I do for the company.
Right.
And if anyone listening, okay, mischief makers out there, if you feel like a cog in the wheel, right? You feel like you're just there to get a paycheck, or you feel like that's all the company thinks of you, is you're just there to get a paycheck. That's all they care about is the work you do. I'm here to challenge you to look at things differently, and obviously look at the team, look at the mission, look at the company you're working for, and really decide, am I excited to be here? And I'm not going to tell anybody to leave their job. Absolutely not. But the way we make our lives better is when we change our perspective on how we look at our lives. So if you're in a situation where you're not too happy, switch that perspective. So that's number one. Number two, oh my goodness, you were talking about just that whole concept of doesn't mean that the founder has to be the CEO. And sometimes founders or the people who start businesses choose not to be, or really are not the right role. That's not the right role for them. And I'm sure many of us have had that experience. But how did you decide? How did you realize that, even though I'm sure you had doubts going from the COO to the CEO role, what mindset shift did you really seriously have to make in order to specifically take on that role, and not just take it on, but embrace it and run with it and create the incredible environment that you've created?
Yeah. It's kind of an old saying where, the universe provides what you're hoping for, right? I was in a very strange spot towards the end of this transition where, again, imposter syndrome. Can I do this? I'm now second guessing whether or not it's what I want to do. Not because I'm not capable, but is this really what I wanted? Is this something I can do? And I think my biggest thing was to just let go of all the controlling thoughts in my head, because I think that's something, as an operations person, we have a lot of control. I get to tell people how things are going to run, right? That's such a ingrained attitude inside of me in operations, where it's so controlling. And going into this space where I had to make this huge mental shift, I thought, I have to suddenly give up so much of this control. Not only am I not going to play in a space anymore that I can control, I have a team that does that now for me so that I can focus on growing a company. That was huge, right? I had to completely get myself out of that space. The other aspect of this was going to be a move in my career that it benefits me in the long run, not just because I hold a title of CEO, but because of the lessons I'm about to learn, the mistakes I'm about to make that are going to make me a better person in the long run in my career. And so the biggest mind shift, the biggest thing that I had to do was just give up all the control. I think a lot of my stress came from trying to control how I looked and how it was going to be and all these things. And once I realized that it's a day by day thing. My mentor reminded me, Brittany, you're going to make mistakes and that's going to be okay, right? We're going to fail forward. We're going to learn from it. You are a young CEO. So on your first venture into all of this, just expect that you're not going to do everything perfectly. Once I really just sat in that energy and let it go, I felt good. I remember doing my first quarterly meeting with this team. And as the CEO, right, here are my commitments to you. Here's where we're going to take the company. Here's how we're going to get there. I had all the plan laid out. I left that meeting with literal shivers because I was like, this is where I'm meant to be and what I'm meant to do. So that was the moment where I learned that letting go of that control early on, that stress, the things I was basically telling myself in my head, it led to a better outcome because I went into our meetings so much more confident. Like we were going to do this, and anything that came up, we would solve it. So that was a huge part of it. It was really just letting go of the control aspect of it.
Okay, hold on. If your mindset was shifted, you were inspired to innovate, and you were spurred into action, don't just move on with your day. Focus, my friend, and take a few minutes to visit CEOmischiefmaker.com to learn more about the value that was shared with you today. Please act now and create some CEO mischief of your own.